When I first saw the promotions for Squid Game, I thought it was going to be a lighthearted reality TV contestant show, kind of like Takeshi's Castle or something. But it was anything but, with the gritty battle royale having scenes that will haunt your dreams. Seriously, I'm still not over episode 6. The show, which has been a massive hit on Netflix, is packed full of Easter eggs, foreshadowing, hidden details, and behind-the-scenes trivia. Some of which you may have missed the first time around, so we thought we'd take a look at them here. Let's go! Now this is a given, but there will be many Squid Game spoilers in this video, so if you don't want to be eliminated from your spoiler-free game, I'd recommend coming back to this video after you finish the show. Now, let's start with the show's biggest twist, that Oh Il-nam, aka Player 1, is actually the mastermind behind the games and the one who's running it from behind the scenes. While this was undoubtedly a shocking moment for many of us out there, myself included, there were actually many clues as to his real identity. For starters, the fact that the neighborhood in the marble game looks so much like the one he grew up in as a child, the fact that his number is 1 and that there are no other elderly players in the game, the fact that he has a deep knowledge about the games played, such as Tug of War, and his delight at playing red light, green light despite all the violence happening around him. But there are some even bigger moments of foreshadowing that we missed the first time around. Such as the robotic girl's scanner in red light, green light not picking him up as a player, the fact that his name translated into English is number 1 man, and in the montage where multiple contestants are waiting for the van to re-enter the game, they're all gassed except for Oh Il-nam, who just enters the van of his own volition. Also, in his conversation with Song Gi-hun, Oh Il-nam basically convinces him to rejoin the game and goes through his reasoning for why he wants to keep on playing. We really should have seen it coming. The knowledge of what the next game will entail is constantly sought after throughout the show, and players like the Doctor, who obtain information on the next game by providing favors, are eliminated due to it not being fair to the other players. However, every player had the opportunity to learn what game would be next if they paid close enough attention. That's because, on the walls of the dormitory where the players sleep, you can see murals of children playing different games, all of which are played at some point in the show. If you look closely, you can see an illustration for Red Light, Green Light, Tug of War, the Glass Bridge, and, of course, the Squid Game itself. Continuing on this foreboding train, a number of characters' deaths in the show are foreshadowed in their lives outside of the game after the vote is called to stop it. For instance, Kang Se-byok holds a knife to a man's throat and tells him she'll rip it open, which is similar to her death at the hands of scumbag Cho Sang-woo. Another resident scumbag, Jung Dae-uksu's death is foreshadowed as he jumps off of a bridge after being trapped by some gangsters trying to kill him, just like the moment he falls to his death from the glass bridge in the game. Ali also steals money and leaves a man to die, just like Cho Sang-woo does to him in the game, while Cho Sang-woo lies in a bathtub in a drenched suit, foreshadowing his fight with Song Gi-hun in the rain wearing a drenched suit. Still with the foreshadowing, at the arcade, Song Gi-hun picks a certain prize to give to his daughter due to the way it looks. Ironically, the box just so happens to resemble the coffins the players are placed in when they're eliminated, while the box has a realistic-looking gunlighter inside, perhaps indicating the true violence of the games. Now this one's a bit contentious, but Song Gi-hun wins 4.5 million at the racetrack, and seeing as his number in the game is 456, and he wins 4.5 million, and there are 6 zeros in a million, maybe that's also foreshadowing his number? Maybe? One of the most notable visuals in the show are the uniforms and masks the guards wear in the games. Seeing as the soldiers are basically indistinguishable wearing the same costumes, they're given different shapes on their masks so people can tell the difference, with the circle representing workers, the triangle representing soldiers, and the square representing managers. And I have to admit, it's a game show and these look like PlayStation symbols to me, so maybe there's that too. However, the shape of the mask and the different roles they have were based on ants and an ant colony, which fits with the animal mask theme seen throughout the show. Another notable visual is the colorful and intricate staircase the players must ascend to get to the next game. Now, if those stairs seem familiar to you, there's a good reason for that. That's because they were inspired by Escher's Relativity, which is a lithograph print by the Dutch artist MC Escher and depicts a world in which the normal laws of gravity do not apply. This is pretty fitting, seeing as the laws of the normal world and society do not apply in the world of the games, or hell as the players call it. Jung Ho-yeon stole many a person's heart with her performance as Kung Se-bayok, with many fans falling in love with the character. What makes it even more impressive is that this is actually her first ever acting role. But Koreans will likely be very familiar with Jung Ho-yeon, as she is a well-known fashion model in the country and was a runner-up in the 4th contest of Korea's Next Top Model. Also, Lee Byung-hun, who plays the enigmatic frontman, is a well-established actor in Korea and has also appeared in a number of Hollywood movies such as The Magnificent Seven, G.I. Joe, and Terminator Genesis. When it comes to the green jumpsuits the players wear, the show's creator, Hwang Dong-hyuk, was actually inspired by school uniforms and the outfits he used to wear as a kid. Initially, he was going to go all in on the school uniform aesthetic, but that would have included shorts, so instead opted to go with the green tracksuits, which were also picked so the red color of blood would pop on screen. The hot pink worn by the guards was picked as it's on the complete opposite side of the color wheel from the green, showcasing that the guards and players are on different teams and are opposites of one another. Now, while the Squid Game is unfortunately embroiled in plagiarism claims, with some stating it as a copy of the 2014 Japanese movie As God Wills, Hwang Dong-hyuk has claimed that his inspiration was manhwa, which are Korean comics that he used to read as a child. Before it got the title The Squid Game, it actually went by another, admittedly much more boring name. In 2019, Netflix announced the show was to be called Round 6, which is in keeping with the 6 different games the contestants play, but this was eventually changed to the much more fun title Squid Game. The Squid Game is visually stunning and very aesthetically appealing, with the big, immersive sets where the games are played being especially captivating. Surprisingly, though, these sets were actually built for real, with very little VFX used in the show. And for instance, the set used for Red Light Green Light, including the robotic girl, were actually built for real, all of which allowed the actors to fully immerse in the scene. With the crazy amount of foreshadowing and intricate storytelling, it's not surprising to learn that the script has actually been in development for some time. In fact, Hwang Dong-hyuk actually started the script all the way back in 2008, finishing the first draft in 2009, but still having to wait 10 years to successfully pitch it. Still, he had to wait to actually finish the series, with filming at one point postponed due to COVID. As we said, very little VFX were used in the show, and not only were the sets real, but the amount of contestants who played the game. For the Red Light Green Light game, there are indeed 456 actors in the scene, instead of digitally inserting people into the scene in post. And finally, let's end on some goofs, shall we?
A what?
One of the best goofs in the show comes down to a typo, as when the frontman reviews the former glass factory workers file during the bridge game, the file reads that he had been working in the factory from 1897 to 2020, meaning that the character could be well into his hundreds. Another goof comes when Gi-hun enters the password for a credit card which he took from his mom secretly in the first episode and enters 0426 as his birthday. Later on, we see his file in the frontman's room and it says it's actually on Halloween. Whoops.
Young grasshopper. You want to see 25 things you missed in Cobra Kai? Well, you came to the right dojo, the Screen Rant Doe. So, like everyone else, us included, you've binged through Season 3 of Cobra Kai, right? I mean, what else is there to do during a pandemic? Now, like me, after not having a coffee for 3 hours, you are having some serious withdrawal symptoms. Well, don't worry, we've got you covered. We are going to take a look at 25 things you might have missed in Cobra Kai Season 3, including Easter eggs to the original movies, awesome behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and even references to some internet theories.
Are you sure this is right?
So, let's show no fear and dive right into some Season 3 details. And beware, spoilers will strike first. So, if you haven't seen Season 3 yet, we suggest coming back when you have. Let's break the ice by taking a look at the Break the Ice Easter egg. In Okinawa, Daniel and Kumiko sit and share a cocktail together at a local bar. The ice provided for said drinks is smashed out of large blocks. Now, if you are a massive Karate Kid fan, this practice may seem somewhat familiar to you. That's because Daniel smashes ice in a similar fashion in the Karate Kid Part 2, where he becomes involved in a wager with Mr. Miyagi's arch-nemesis Sato and his student Chosen. I think I'm going to stick with getting my ice out of an ice tray. It's much easier. Speaking of Chosen, he made his long-awaited return in Season 3, with the show filling in the blanks since his fight with Daniel in Karate Kid 2 to his return in Cobra Kai. Daniel, on his return to Okinawa, reunites with his bitter foe, Chosen, who he hasn't seen for 30 years. Chosen, in an Easter egg to his Uncle Sato, pretends to still hate Daniel, leading us to believe he is still the villain.
Can I have a drink?
I don't drink.
But we soon learn that Chosen is actually a changed man and has even been running the Miyagi-Do and teaching there as a sensei. Chosen also states in a heartwarming story that he was suicidal after the events of Karate Kid 2 until Sato helped him to see the light and turn his life around. Chosen also seeks forgiveness and friendship from Kumiko, and eventually Daniel also forgives him and the two end up leaving on good terms, similar to the relationship between Miyagi and Sato in Part 2. But of course, the biggest return to take place in Season 3 is Elizabeth Shue, reprising her character of Allie Mills. Her introduction to the show had been teased since Season 2, so although it wasn't shocking to see her return, it was still an undoubtedly epic moment. But no one knew that Shue would be reprising the character for definite until the very last moment, with Ralph Macchio saying he didn't know she was returning till he received the script.
Why didn't you tell me about this at lunch?
He also said that there was a backup plan in place in case she didn't return, and that they would discover it was actually her husband doing the back and forth with Johnny, which, to be honest, would have been quite strange. Thankfully, they didn't do this, and we got to see Allie back in the flesh. Another, albeit more obscure return, was one you truly might not have noticed. Daniel's journey to Okinawa was initially to help refresh his automobile business's relationship with Diona Motors, but along the way he takes a stroll down nostalgia way. At one point, though, these two roads converge when he meets up with their senior vice president of sales for Diona International. And who should be the senior vice president? None other than Yuna, aka the girl bellringer, who Daniel saved from a typhoon in Part 2, and is even played by the same actress, Tracy Taguchi. It's another heartwarming moment, as well as a great Easter egg, and is karma truly at its finest. You can never underestimate the power of a good tea.
Sick of tea? That's like being sick of breathing.
Daniel LaRusso also seems to understand the importance of tea, as he meets up and catches up with Kumiko after spending decades apart. Before they have their ice-cold cocktails, they share a hot pot of tea. Like the ice for the cocktails, this too is a reference to Karate Kid Part 2 and the movie's famous tea ceremony. As I said, you really can't underestimate the power of a good tea. Have you ever gotten so mad you've just punched through a car window?
Give me the goddamn page!
Well, in the Karate Kid world, it seems like a sensei tradition to punch through a car's window. In Season 3 of Cobra Kai, we see Daniel doing the apparently time-honored tradition, just like his mentor's enemy Kreese, who ended up breaking car windows as he tried to punch Mr. Miyagi in the beginning of the Karate Kid Part 2. The Cobra Kai outfit are known for their memorable mantras and sayings, and even if you don't agree with them, I'm sure you can remember them. Like seriously, when I say strike first, who doesn't say the words strike hard, no mercy afterwards?
I can't hear you! Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, sir!
But there was a mantra you might have missed in Season 3. As Daniel enters the Cobra Kai dojo in the first episode of Season 3, Aftermath, he sees the mantra, "Fear does not exist," written on the wall. This was Kreese's mantra while training students in the original Karate Kid movie.
Fear does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei!
We have mentioned a few notable appearances in Season 3 already, but there was one major one to happen at the end of the season, although they didn't actually appear on screen. In the final moments of Season 3, we see Kreese making a phone call to someone he hasn't seen in a long time. Although he doesn't see the person he is talking to, we can say with relative certainty that he was talking to Terry Silver. Silver is a major Cobra Kai benefactor and served as the main antagonist for the Karate Kid Part 3.
A man can't stand. He can't fight.
Silver was also Kreese's old friend during their time serving in the Vietnam War, and we see Kreese's time in Vietnam during a flashback. We even see him saving a guy named Twig, who their commanding officer calls Silver. I wonder if they're setting something up for Season 4. It's a well-known fact that all the coolest people have a cardboard cutout of themselves, right? No? Just me? Okay, well, anyway, Daniel comes across a cutout of Kreese because he's cool like that. Now, while it isn't the exact same cutout from the original movies, Daniel does come across a cutout of Kreese in both Karate Kid Part 1 and Part 3, because as I said, cool guys have cardboard cutouts of themselves. Now, while Chosen and Daniel may have let bygones be bygones, that doesn't mean that they didn't step back into their fighting selves, just like they did in Karate Kid Part 2, even if this time they're not enemies. But as the two go through the motions, the fight ends in a familiar fashion, with Chosen honking Daniel's nose,
Honk!
a move Miyagi performed on Kreese in Part 2. Some of the best moments of the original Karate Kid movie come through Miyagi's abstract and often dangerous methods of teaching. One of these moments is the time Miyagi teaches Daniel how to balance by standing on the bow of a small rowboat. Season 3 of Cobra Kai pays reference to this when Daniel and Sam have a father and daughter moment when they hit the water and the two make a joke about whether or not Daniel will make Sam stand on the bow of the boat.
Is that why you brought me here? To trick me into doing karate?
Well, what? No, not at all. This has nothing to do with that.
Speaking of Miyagi and his infinite wisdom, one of the most famous sayings among many is the line,
"No such thing, bad student, only bad teacher."
They pay homage to this line in Cobra Kai when Kreese echoes the sentiment, saying,
Because you know what they say. There's no such thing as a bad student.
But Kreese doesn't just pay reference to Miyagi's lines, but also to his very own dialogue. As testosterone flares between Kreese and Daniel, Kreese says,
This time, Johnny and I will finish it once and for all.
which is certainly a reference to the moment in the final climax of the original movie where Kreese yells at Johnny to finish him. Yeah, I wonder how that turned out. Like cool guys have cardboard cutouts of themselves, everyone knows there is no better place to go on a first date than a mini golf course. No?
Am I so out of touch?
Golf and stuff is an important part of both Cobra Kai and the original Karate Kid series. It's where Ali and Daniel go out on a date, and it's the same place where Miguel and Sam also go out on a first date. Ali and Johnny also go out there in Season 3, and you can even hear the song Feel the Night in the background, the same song from Daniel and Ali's date from the original movie. Now, as we have already mentioned, Daniel's trip to Okinawa is a literal journey down memory lane with Easter eggs aplenty. Another one we see is the return of the house from Karate Kid Part 2, which Kimiko has now inherited from her Aunt Yuki. It's almost as if the trip to Okinawa was just for the purpose of Easter eggs and callbacks or something. For a supposedly non-violent sport, soccer has its fair share of scuffles and fighting, even if it is sometimes rather melodramatic. Therefore, it is the perfect place for Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do to work out their differences, and the two opposing factions end up fighting on the soccer field. This is a direct reference to the original movie where Daniel got into a scuffle with Cobra Kai. Maybe they should just stick to soccer next time. One of the best things about Cobra Kai is that it has added a long list of complexities to the central characters and blurred the lines between right and wrong and good and bad. This is reinforced further in relation to Ali's return. In the second movie, Ali is written out in one line where Daniel says she crashed his car and left him for a guy from UCLA.
She tells me that she's just fallen in love with some football player.
Ali shows it's a little more complex than that though upon her return to Cobra Kai, saying that she was just talking to someone from UCLA when Daniel freaked out and became jealous. I know this isn't just me that thinks this, but Daniel really isn't the hero of this story. But you know, more on that later on. Now on to one of the tastier Easter eggs and coolest pieces of trivia. In another piece of loaded Kreese dialogue, Kreese says, "Let me tell you about your dad. He was always a scrapper.
But the moment I knew he was the real deal was his first All Valley.
He made the quarters, but he drew a kid named Vidal." Now, Johnny defeats Vidal in the 1984 All-Valley tournament to make it to the finals, but that's not the fight Kreese is referencing here. He is paying reference to Johnny's first year of competition in 1981, when he first went up against Vidal. But what makes this more interesting is that the actor behind Vidal is attributed to the infamous crane kick on IMDb. You know, the illegal move where Daniel knocks out Johnny? That one. Now, as you know, Johnny uses Facebook to get back in touch with Ali, but he also has some Easter egg-worthy Facebook friends. Look carefully and you will see he is friends with Shane Keller and Mallory Yund, both of whom are producers on the show. Ah, poor naive Johnny. Never befriend your bosses on social media. It never goes well. Trust me. Like golf and stuff, skeleton outfits also have a constant importance in both Cobra Kai and The Karate Kid. In the original movie, Johnny and the Cobra Kai crew can all be seen wearing those infamous skeleton costumes during Halloween. Now, while the skeleton costume is referenced early on in Cobra Kai, with Miguel wearing a similar costume in the show, they also pay reference to the skeleton costume in Season 3. When Cobra Kai invades LaRusso's home in the big climax of Season 3, can you guess what one of them is wearing? Yep, you guessed it. Look closely enough at Tori's sweater and of course, you will see skeleton bones.
You better watch your back.
Now, this next Easter egg might just be us looking too far into things, but knowing how the minds behind Cobra Kai operate, we are pretty sure that this is a very deliberate Easter egg. While at the SDJC, we see Robbie reading a copy of the literary classic Lord of the Flies, which on the surface doesn't have many parallels with Cobra Kai, unless the show is going to take a very dark turn down the road. But is it probably a very wink wink nudge nudge to the maestro, Mr. Miyagi? Because who is the lord at catching flies with chopsticks? Yep, Mr. Miyagi. Okay, maybe this one is a stretch, but seriously, I'm not putting it past them to have made that an Easter egg, unless Robbie just happens to be a fan of the classics. No offense, but that is kind of unlikely. One of the most famous objects to be introduced in The Karate Kid Part 2 is the Okinawa hand drum, which is a very real traditional music item. But since it was in Part 2, it has very much been linked with the franchise. In Part 2, Daniel is inspired by the drums in his fight with Chosen and even uses the drum techniques to eventually defeat him. Seeing how important it is to the franchise, it is therefore no surprise then that the item makes an appearance in Cobra Kai when Miguel comes across it. Sam even shows Miguel the famous hand trick that Miyagi once taught Daniel back in the day and basically passes down the torch. Or drum, in this case.
Is that my drum in your pocket?
Hawk's wardrobe pays many callbacks to the original franchise, and to be honest, so does Hawk in general, with him riding on a motorbike similar to the Cobra Kai crew in the original movie. But focusing more on his wardrobe for a second, we see Hawk wearing a bright red jacket in Season 3, which is very reminiscent of the one worn by Johnny in the original movie. Now, we have already mentioned it, but there has been a constant debate surrounding the legality of the crane kick that Daniel uses on Johnny at the end of the movie. You already know my thoughts on the subject. Now, Cobra Kai has never shied away from this debate and even makes fun of it in the very first episode, where Johnny also brings into question the move's legality.
It was an illegal kick.
The showrunners decided to stoke the fire even more by making reference to it again in Season 3, when Miguel says the line,
"Sensei Lawrence told me about how you beat him with an illegal kick."
Hey. The rules state anything above the waist is legal.
Yeah, this debate isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But they don't need to convince me otherwise. I know it was illegal, Daniel, and you know what they say. Cheaters never prosper. Except I guess they did in this case, because he won. So... But of course, it's not just the crane kick that has fans debating online. Like Star Wars and especially the Who Shot First debate, there are a number of Karate Kid debates. But other than the crane kick, the most notable has to be who is the real Karate Kid. Seeing as the movie centers on Daniel, the safe money is on him. But if you're like me, Barney Stinson,
whom this monster defeated with a cheap, illegal head kick,
and a few others on the internet, you will know the true Karate Kid is Johnny Lawrence. But we are not just a small band of misfits here. This theory is actually pretty popular on the internet and, with Cobra Kai, is quickly gaining traction. Like the crane kick debate, the show's producers make reference to this debate and stoke the flames through a piece of dialogue. In the first episode of Season 3, Daniel says,
"When I went to school here, I was bullied, and karate saved me."
Bull. I heard you were the real bully.
Johnny clearly isn't the only one that thinks Daniel was the villain of the movie. What makes this funnier is that the voice of the off-screen man is none other than the show's co-creator, Josh Head. See, he knows what's up.
For years, people have been asking Riot Games to create some sort of show or movie after consistently putting out incredible animated videos, and they've finally gone and done it and created the amazing Arcane. Those that have watched it just know that Arcane has been one of the biggest and best surprises of the year in terms of how well put together it is. Now, this show can definitely be enjoyed by a general audience, but if you don't actually play League of Legends, there are a ton of references you might have missed in Season 1. Let's dive in. The show begins with two of our main characters, Vi and Jinx, or who's then known as Powder, walking across the bridge between the two main nations of the show, Zond and Piltover, after a war between the two has ended. As they're walking, there's a song that's being hummed, which is called Dear Friend Across the River. The lyrics of the song reference rivers and mighty towers, which are two key map elements from the game. When Vi, Powder, Clagger, and Milo are jumping over rooftops, we can see cupcakes on one of the balconies. Clagger even manages to snag one for himself. These cupcakes are actually a reference to multiple things. The first being that Caitlin, who is actually at the building our favorite gang of kids are breaking into, has an ability in the game called Yordle Snaptrap, which has a little cupcake in the center of it. Of course, we later meet Caitlin in the show, who Vi nicknames her as Cupcake as well.
You're hot, Cupcake.
These cupcakes are also similar to the ones we see in the Bittersweet Lulu splash art, and in the final episode of the season, it also looks like there's a cupcake in the music box that Jinx made, which is also a nice callback to the first episode where Powder finds a similar music box in Jace's room. Oh, and one more Cupcake reference. In the game, if Vi survives a shot from Caitlin's ultimate ability, she shouts,
"Nice shot, Cupcake."
The workshop that our gang breaks into belongs to Jace, who we later meet in episode 2. When Powder is searching through the workshop, she comes across a sandwich that she eats with no remorse, but under that sandwich are blueprints to Jace's iconic hammer from the game, and the same one that we later see him bust out in that epic fight with Vi in episode 8. More on that later. After the small incident at the building our protagonist just broke into, they run through the Incognia Plaza, named after the strange-looking statue in the middle, which is called the Runeterra Incognium. This statue is actually a device that was supposed to be able to locate any individual in the world. Funnily enough, the entire first act of Arcane is about finding the 4 kids who caused the incident. Oh, and that device was actually the lifetime's work of Valentina Zindello, a scientist from Piltover, but I guess now it's just a nice-looking object? Continuing with episode 1, as Powder runs away from the fight with Deckard and his goons, we can actually see a mushroom on the side of the wall that she tries to hide behind. This shroom, of course, is a reference to everyone's favorite, or most likely everyone's most hated champion, Teemo. Teemo was one of the original 17 champions of the game, and his ultimate ability allows him to place invisible mushrooms all across the map, making him one of the most annoying champions to play against. Anyways, this isn't the only Teemo reference we see in Arcane. As the kids make their way back home to what they call the lanes, which in itself is a reference to the 3 main lanes of the game's map, we see some eggs lying in a crate, and these could actually be referring to what the mushrooms look like for Teemo's cottontail skin in the game. Next to those eggs, you can see also a caged Krug, one of the jungle monsters from the game. In Vander's hideout, you can see Powder playing some arcade game with Teemo on it. In Marcus's daughter's room, one of his daughter's books has images of Teemo on it, and lastly, we can see another Teemo graffitied on the wall of the Firelight base. Riot Games, always reminding us of that devil character. There are a ton of little details packed into Benzo's shop. When Vander and Clagger first get there, we meet a talented inventor called Little Man, or who is later known as Echo. Damn, can we mention that glow up though? We first see him fixing a grandfather clock, which is a hint to his character in the game who has everything to do with time. When he fights Jinx on the bridge in episode 7, the beginning of their fight is played out, and then it gets rewinded, exactly how his ultimate ability works in the game, where he can go 4 seconds back in time. Benzo is also examining something himself, and that's not just any random shell. That's an old, now non-existent item called Heart of Gold. Kind of funny he's examining that because, you know, he doesn't exist much longer after this scene either. At the back of Benzo's shop, there is a frowning hat, an obvious reference to one of the most common items in the game, Rabadon's death cap. You can see a helm hanging above the entrance door as well, and this helm belongs to none other than Tryndamere, another one of the original champions in the game, and is also the gamertag of Mark Merrill, the co-founder and co-chairman of Riot Games. When the enforcers come into Benzo's shop and Echo goes to the roof of the shop to eavesdrop on the conversation, we can see a clock in his possession, another reference to his future chrono powers. And when he spies on Vander and Co., the camera is inside 3 masks, 2 of which resemble 2 items from the game, Leandri's Torment and Haunting Guise. Right outside this door, we see a vehicle up against a wall, which is the same vehicle as the one that Echo rides in the music video from the introduction song Enemy, sung by Imagine Dragons. Speaking of Imagine Dragons, we actually see the band in an animated form in episode 5 singing that same intro song. It's also not the band's first time collaborating on a League of Legends project. They previously sang the song Warriors for Riot's 2014 World Championship. The following scene after Benzo's place shows Jinx tweaking her gadgets, but you can actually see one of her pillows looks very much like her rocket launcher from the game, Fishbones. At the very end of the first episode where we finally meet our main antagonist Silco, he's having a conversation with a nameless scientist, although he's not really nameless for long. If you watch the show with closed captions, they actually reveal that this scientist is none other than Singed, another character from the game. As Powder is absolutely losing it over Vi and the others leaving her behind to go and save Vander, we get a shot at a little box of Powder's things, which has 2 Easter eggs. The first being that we see the name of Violet on a piece of paper, which is, of course, Vi's full name. And the second thing that we see are 2 wings, which are a reference to the Star Guardian Jinx skin. That skin actually has 2 mascots associated with it, named Shiro and Kuro, which mean white and black in Japanese, kind of like how Powder and Jinx are 2 opposite personalities. As Jace and Victor figure out how to stabilize and control Hextech, Jace throws a gear through the crystal which accelerates quickly, a reference to one of his in-game abilities, the acceleration gate. This isn't the first reference to his abilities either. As I said earlier, we'll get back to episode 8, and this is where we see many of Jace's abilities like his Shock Blast, Lightning Field, and of course, many thundering blows that knock opponents away using that big ol' hammer of his. Those also aren't just normal opponents in purple suits, by the way. These enemies are a reference to an item in the game called Turbo Chem Tank, an item that makes you go super fast, exactly like those purple suited monsters. After Powder's monkey sets off the bomb and subsequently kills 2 of our friends, there's a shot of Clagger's glasses on the floor. These glasses are the same ones that we see in Vi's splash art in the game. At the end of episode 3, when Silco is consoling Powder, I guess this is where she becomes Jinx officially after being called so by her sister.
Why did you leave me? Because you're a jinx.
We get a shot that highlights her eyes as they turn from gray to purple, foreshadowing episode 8 where Jinx is infused with Shimmer after barely surviving the battle on the bridge with Echo. The second act of the show begins with the introduction of the Firelights, an unknown gang that's fighting the good fight against Silco. Once again, we see the leader of the Firelights, who we later find out is Echo, carrying another watch, once more referring to his chrono powers. As Silco's goons are loading up the blimp with Shimmer, we see a shot of Gragas on one of the barrels. Gragas is a character best known for shooting his own barrels at his enemies in the game. Elsewhere at the festival, we get a quick shot at some diving equipment, a reference to another champion in the game, Nautilus. At Jace and Victor's new laboratory, we get to see some of the tech they've been working on with the power of Hextech. We get our first glimpse at Vi's future gauntlets that are supposed to help with mining, but we all know what those bad boys can really do. And we also see what they call the Hex Claw, which Victor will later present to Heimerdinger. This is a reference to one of Victor's abilities in the game called Death Ray. In the brothel that Vi and Caitlyn enter, there's a shot of 2 people wearing 2 different masks. These masks are referring to the champion Kindred, as they are wearing the wolf and sheep masks. The opening of Act 3 shows us the Firelights in a short musical clip, showing off the stylish group and gives us even more references to who Echo is as a character. We see the symbol for the gang and it gives us 2 little Easter eggs, the first being that the symbol is in the shape of a Z, referring to his time travel equipment called the Z Drive, which we actually later see when Echo shows Vi and Caitlyn where he keeps the gemstone hidden. You can see it more in use in his cinematic called Seconds when Riot Games first introduced the character. The second reference is that the Z is stylized in a way to look like an hourglass, the same symbol he has drawn on his face, and more things to do with time, in case that wasn't already clear from the other mentions in this video. Oh, and just in case you wanted even more little Echo details, his name is carved into the Vander tribute statue that Silco sits at. No more Echo references anymore, okay? Hey, remember that haunting song from the opening sequence? Well, Jinx sings it once again here on that same bridge where her parents died. This time it had to be Marcus and some enforcers that had to go, the opposite of what happened at the beginning of the show. After Vi and Caitlyn move on from the bridge, they sneak their way into Caitlyn's room where we can actually see a purple outfit and top hat behind them, a reference to Caitlyn's original look from the game. Just like in the show, Vi's abilities in-game are mostly her just punching and dunking on people with her giant gauntlets. However, in her fight against Savika, she manages to activate a shield that gives her the opening to defeat her. This shield is a reference to her passive ability in the game called Blast Shield. This incredible series comes to an end on a huge cliffhanger after Jinx fires off a massive rocket from her rocket launcher, Fishbones. What she fires off is known as a Super Mega Death Rocket, her exact ultimate ability from the game.
The international Netflix sensation Money Heist is about to come to an end. While this is an absolute tragedy, there is one positive about it. What a great excuse to watch Money Heist again. What better way to enhance your rewatch is there than learning all about the stories behind the stories that brought the world's favorite TV show to life? Money Heist, or La Casa de Papel, is one of the most successful international television hits of all time. It's the top-viewed Netflix series in 6 different countries, propelling the stars of the show to the kind of international fame most television actors couldn't even imagine. Well, it wasn't always that way, that's for sure. In fact, the cast and crew were pretty much sure that the first season of the show that aired on Spain's Antena 3 would be its last. Then, in the show's biggest plot twist to date, Netflix took the flatlining show and turned it into one of their biggest success stories. With as many memorable characters as Money Heist has, you'd think that the creators of the series had everything mapped out from the very start. Well, it turns out that the exact opposite was true. Turns out that there was only a loose outline of what they wanted for the cast, with hopes that the actors would inspire the characters. Well, I'd say that strategy paid off handsomely. What's even more unbelievable is that the intricately plotted seasons weren't intricately plotted at all. Just like with casting, they had a rough idea of where they wanted to go and found the story as they went. I don't think flying by the seat of your pants as a television philosophy has ever worked out so well. The Professor might be the single best character in all of Money Heist. The show's resident mastermind was actually the hardest character for the writers to get a handle on. At first, they were thinking that he would be an older man played by a veteran actor like Jose Coronado. His commitments elsewhere made them rethink the character. Eventually, they went with the exasperated primary school teacher look that the Professor exemplifies so well. There's nothing that screams the Professor like an insecure genius with dorky charm in a cheap-looking suit. And heck, I wouldn't have it any other way. Planning one of the biggest heists in the history of man isn't easy whether you're robbing a bank or just writing about people who rob banks. So it's no shame that the creators of the show found themselves a little over their heads when it came to actually planning out the heist from the title. Luckily, they found plenty of people willing to help. From very unlikely places. Members of the National Police and the Spanish Ministry of Interior were called in to offer their professional advice. I can't imagine how that conversation would have started. So, if someone was going to plan the perfect robbery to utterly humiliate you, how would one do it? Counterfeiting is a serious crime no matter where you are. So when it came to Money Heist faking the printing of millions, they had to take special care to make sure their bills were accurate enough to pass on camera, but not accurate enough to pass if someone tried to spend it. It turns out that the solution was to make bills just large enough that they would never pass as the real thing. I would have just used Monopoly money, but that's probably why they don't pay me the big bucks. Most heist dramas out there really don't worry too much about deep emotional themes for their films or TV shows. Money Heist didn't only want to make the best heist scenes out there, but they wanted to subvert the traditional motivations characters in the genre have. While the show seems like it's all about greed at first, you notice after a while that there's a greater thing than money drawing all the characters in. And that is love. No matter how much they try to fight it, everyone from Tokyo to the Professor is drawn into romance whether they want to be or not. That highlights one of the show's biggest themes. Everyone succumbs to love. Money Heist really doesn't like defining things in simple terms like good guys and bad guys. The show starts off by depicting a group of anti-heroes violently attacking a bank full of innocent people. Other series about anti-heroes like Breaking Bad or The Sopranos may have you root for the bad guy, but you know things aren't going to end well for them. Money Heist flips this on its head by making you ask, who are the real villains? By eventually depicting them as Robin Hood-style thieves, our anti-heroes are recast, and the question is asked to the audience, are the robbers the bad guys, or is it the institutions they're robbing? This was evidently very much intentional, as the show was intended to be as much a revenge story against the system as much as it was a heist story. Man, I love the theme song to Money Heist. True story. I actually listen to it on my Spotify all the time. So naturally, I was interested in learning about where the inspiration for My Life Is Going On came from. Songwriter Cecilia Kroll wrote and performed the lyrics to the now famous song. Apparently, it was inspired by one of the earliest scenes in the show where Tokyo is offered a new opportunity by the Professor. Now that I know what inspired the song, I can really see how it's all about Tokyo moving on confidently into a new situation with confidence. Creator Alex Pina, director Jesus Colmenar, and director of photography Miguel Amoedo were called the most prolific television trio in recent years by the Spanish newspaper La Vanguardia, or The Vanguard. The article went in depth about how the trio works and where their inspiration comes from. Their projects tend to have a primary color as a major source of inspiration. For Money Heist, everything revolved around the color red over gray sets. If you look closely, you'll notice that blue, green, and yellow were forbidden by the team. When they commit, boy howdy. they commit. Berlin is one of the most complex characters in the series. By complex, I mean he's utterly terrifying, but in a way I kinda like. He goes from the show's biggest jerk to one willing to sacrifice everything for the team. So where did Pedro Alonso find his inner Berlin? Well, apparently the day before his audition, Pedro met a person he described as an intelligent person who was, quote, provocative and manipulative to him. Judging from the dark places Alonso took Berlin, I imagine he met his manipulative provocateur in an alleyway in the dead of night. Okay, I know. The biggest Easter egg that everyone likes to talk about is that Tokyo's style and personality is based on Natalie Portman's young Matilda from The Professional. At this point, pretty much every die-hard Money Heist fan knows this already, but do you know who Inspector Raquel Murillo is based on? Apparently, actress Itziar Utuño took inspiration from The Silence of the Lambs main character Clarice Starling. The female law enforcement officer trying to navigate a male-driven profession seems like the perfect point of inspiration. I'm just glad that the series hasn't given us a character based on Hannibal Lecter or Buffalo Bill. Actually, that's not true. That'd actually be pretty rad. Salvador Dali is the perfect artist for the professor to base their iconic masks off of. The brilliant surrealist painter is not only an icon in Spain, but his style of using confusion and a subversion of expectations in his art is exactly what the professor is all about. It's just too bad that Money Heist, didn't actually ask for any permission to use Dali's visage as the main image for their series. The Gala Salvador Dali Foundation has been very critical of the series since they were not consulted on Dali's image and that it's being used for criminal purposes. Just to put it out there, if anyone wants to use a mask with my face on it for a heist show, I'm cool with it. If you're like me and you want more Money Heist like right now, it's not a super easy thing to do. The next best thing is a different show by Alex Pina. The show Locked Up, or Vis-a-Vis, is about a young woman who gets incarcerated in a dangerous prison. It's like a much more intense version of Orange is the New Black with similar themes and artistic styles to Money Heist. If you like it as well, it just got a spin-off with Vis-a-Vis El Oasis in 2020. If you're a fan of heist movies, you probably recognize a lot about Money Heist. The series clearly takes inspiration from famous films like Inside Man, Reservoir Dogs, Dog Day Afternoon, The Sting, and the Ocean movies. It subverts the classic Ocean's 11 build the team thing by just jumping into the heist and showing the team get together without using names, Reservoir Dogs style. Then they get into a hostage situation, kind of like Inside Man. Where they really subvert these movies intentionally is by focusing more on the passions of the characters than the robbery. A major real-world inspiration is clearly the Occupy Wall Street movement, which definitely had a similar style to Money Heist. Like our heroes, Occupy Wall Street was a massive rebellion against the modern economic system using stylish masks. Instead of a Salvador Dali mask, though, they went with V for Vendetta's Guy Fawkes mask. As a big fan of surrealism and Alan Moore, I'm not really sure which mask design I like more. Does anyone else need a lot more of the professor himself, Alvaro Morte? Well, lucky for all of us, he was recently cast in the hotly anticipated adaptation of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series for Amazon Prime. He will be playing the character of Logain Alblar. Fantasy shows are a bit of a gamble after the ending of Game of Thrones, but we know the series will be better than the first attempt to adapt the Wheel of Time for FX. Because nothing could be worse than that. Ugh. It's no surprise that Money Heist lead actress Ursula Cobrero is breaking out in Hollywood right now. What is surprising is how long it took. She recently appeared as the Baroness in Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins. The thing that I find funny about this is where the film is set. The movie was filmed in Tokyo, Japan to sell the urban modern ninja thing they were going for. So the first big Hollywood project for Tokyo was in Tokyo. And you know what, that's just perfect. Here's to hoping that the G.I. Joe film franchise continues so we can see a lot more of the Baroness in the years to come. Although, you know, with the critical and commercial response, I guess that's not too likely. It doesn't matter if the show's going to end because you can't keep a good show like Money Heist down for good. If you have any desire to go through the entire journey again as if it's the first time, you're in luck. A South Korean adaptation of Money Heist is on the way. This seems kind of perfect considering how popular K-dramas and La Casa de Papel are internationally on Netflix. Of course, Netflix's track record with adaptations is not exactly spotless. Hopefully this isn't a Death Note situation. That may be the most tragic thing Netflix has ever produced. Although the narrator, I say otherwise, but you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm just a voice. Money Heist had one of the best first episodes of a TV series I've ever seen. Be honest, you didn't dare touch that remote when episode 2 started to play. It grabs you from go and promises a ride you won't ever forget. Well, apparently this kind of excellence is really, really hard to get right. How hard? Well, apparently they went through 50 drafts of the original script for episode 1 before they got it right. Even the first 5 lines apparently took a whole month to get down. After that, they started taking down a script a week to keep up with production, but getting this train started sounds rough. Everyone in Hollywood is all about that franchise life. It's so bad right now that a ton of films like Without Remorse just seem like extended trailers for the franchise they want you to eventually fall in love with. So, what better way to build a franchise than by taking it from an already beloved property? Well, that's already in the air as the creators of Money Heist have had conversations about spin-offs, sequels, and even a movie that could follow up the series after it ends. So that means at least a few of the characters survive until the end credits roll. That's something at least. The Money Heist fandom is generally pretty awesome. The show is a great way for international audiences to connect with one another over a shared love in a healthy way. That being said, some fans take things way too far with their love. For instance, in Nantes, France, a pair of fans attacked a hotel and a shop while wearing the iconic Salvador Dali masks. That is definitely taking your fandom, a little too far. And you thought it was bad when the Rick and Morty fans attacked McDonald's over Szechuan sauce. As of right now, there's no Money Heist video game. This is clearly the biggest mistake in video game history, on par with the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. Fortunately, we have been offered a bit of a compromise. The Tom Clancy Rainbow Six Siege gave Money Heist fans an olive branch by offering a limited-time Money Heist event to their Operation Ember Rising expansion. The event was filled with cool callbacks and skins for fans of the series. It may not be the Money Heist game of my dreams, but it's something. The Real Bank of Spain rudely didn't want to shut down so that a TV show could pretend to rob it for several weeks at a time. So inconsiderate of them. The production created a 2-level soundstage to resemble the bank instead. They based the look of the bank on the Spanish architecture of the Francisco Franco era. Setting the series in a bank inspired by fascism sounds exactly like something Money Heist would do, actually. I really love the style of Money Heist, but not as much as the Italian fashion label Diesel. They famously launched a line based on the style of the international hit. T-shirts, hoodies, caps, and more were based on characters, colors, and logos of the series. Now I need you to excuse me so I can go buy an unreasonable amount of those clothes. I definitely need a Tokyo shirt, like, right now. Okay, so there's one production Easter egg that genuinely scares me. Before they decided on the Salvador Dali masks, the option they almost went with was a Don Quixote mask. Quixote famously was a knight who tried to fight windmills thinking they were giants. He's become a symbol for hopeless causes. So the idea that one of their first choices was Quixote makes me think that they might be doomed. I really, really hope not, but I guess we'll find out soon.
Shadow and Bone really has it all. Fantasy action, gunslinging, interesting lore, and all the smoldering looks you could possibly want in a TV show. As much as fans loved this series, there's one thing they need more than anything else right now: a reason to watch it again. Luckily, I've got you with all the Easter eggs, book changes, and secrets you need to make for a satisfying rewatch to 2021's biggest hit so far. If what you really need is more Shadow and Bone, there's a really easy way to jump right back into Ravka. If you didn't know already, the show is based on an extremely popular and prolific book series from author Leigh Bardugo, known as the Grishaverse. The first book, which shares the series title Shadow and Bone, is the first book in a trilogy. Beyond that, there are a ton of short stories, 2 duologies, and companion books. So if you need to quench your thirst for more Grisha action, Bardugo has practically provided an ocean. Overall, Shadow and Bone stays relatively close to the spirit of the books, a lesson a lot of fantasy novel adaptations could learn from. Artemis Fowl, I'm looking at you. That being said, the series does take a few liberties with the source material that has divided a lot of the fanbase. For example, Alina went through some big changes. The character overall has a lot more agency than her book counterpart. Also, in order to include more diversity, the series came up with the idea that Alina was part Shu. While a lot of fans liked her enhanced personality, the constant scenes of people hating on Alina didn't sit well with everyone. In the series, Mal is kind of the ultimate love interest. Well, he would be if the Duke of Hastings from Bridgerton didn't exist. Mal's kind treatment of Alina and his constant drive to action basically made him a Disney prince. In the books, however, he isn't nearly as ideal. The relationship between Mal and Alina was always strong, but it was enhanced both by altering Mal's personality and the electric chemistry between actors Jessie May Lee and Archie Renault. This was one change most book fans seem to be very happy about. Pretty much every Shadow and Bone fan is still fanning themselves over some of those scenes between General Kerrigan and Alina. There's no doubt that Ben Barnes made the Black Heretic a full-blown internet sensation. It's kind of strange to think of how different the character could have been, though. Most notably, the whole General Kerrigan thing is a title the series pushes, not the books. In the series, he's primarily just referred to as the Darkling. The producers wanted to ground the character a bit more and thought calling him Darkling might give away that he was a villain. I mean, all of us have seen like 30 YA adaptations by now. We all knew he was the bad guy from like scene 1, right?
Submit to
While Alina Starkov was the main character of the series, many fans ended up getting more wrapped up in the plots of the fiendish crows, who go from the Sun Summoner's would-be captors to her saviors by the season's end. So it's kind of wild to learn that the crows weren't actually in the first Grishaverse book at all. Even though they seem like an integral part of the first season, the crew was actually lifted from the Six of Crows duology and placed in the main plot. This was because... well, do I even have to explain? Look at how cool they are! Of course the producers figured out a way to bring them in. How could you not? One of the biggest challenges the writers had adapting the first season was how they were going to put the crows into the story. Not only did they have literally nothing to do with the opening Sun Summoner arc, they also come from an entirely different part of the world. These questions ended up providing their own answers as they had to formulate a heist involving Alina and a complex way for them to cross the fold. This ended up lending the season some of its most exciting new moments for both new fans and old fans alike. Full disclosure, Jesper Fahey is by far my favorite character in the series. I mean, he's a quick-witted, gunslinging, gambling addict with more charm than bullets. As much a fan of Jesper's as I thought I was, there's one person who is almost certainly his biggest fan, actor Kit Young. The young Shakespearean actor was so fond of the character that he went out and learned a ton of cool gun tricks. Despite being somewhat scared of breaking his prop guns at the beginning of the series, he became an expert by season's end. Now we get to see just how good a gunslinger Kit Young really is. I don't know about you, but that sounds like exactly what Jesper would do. Kaz Brekker is everyone's favorite criminal mastermind right now. Well, him and Zemo from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I guess. The one thing Kaz is known for above all else is being prepared for pretty much any situation. I mean, he squared off against the Darkling and lived to tell the tale. Well, apparently this is something that he and actor Freddie Carter have in common. In order to prepare for the role, Carter learned a sleight of hand trick so that he could embody Kaz more. Hopefully his method acting didn't lead him learning how to be a criminal mastermind as well. Wait, on second thought, hopefully it did. That'd be awesome. Inej may be the most complex character in the series. She's a devotedly religious assassin who has lived as a performer, a slave, and as part of a criminal crew. The show actually dove deeper into her story than even the books did. When we meet Inej in Six of Crows, she's already pretty adept at the art of stabbing and has overcome her servitude to the menagerie. The writers wanted to give Inej a long arc through the series that would see her arrive where we first meet her in the first Crows book over time. I don't think it's controversial to say that the train ride sequence in Shadow and Bone introduced the best new character in the series. No, I'm not talking about you, Arcane. Sure, the conductor was also an addition for the series, but he definitely isn't the show's best new character. That is 100% the goat named Milo. It turns out that the goat wasn't for the mission, for the Volcra, or even for Jesper. He was for us. And now I can't wait for the Milo the Goat animated spin-off. The crows weren't the only duology characters who were brought into the story. The surprisingly heartwarming story of Nina Zenik and her witch-hunting captor, Matthias, was inserted alongside all the sun-summoning action of Alina and the Darkling. In the end, the series even does the impossible by bringing every single separate plot together onto one boat. Will Alina and the crows both help Nina recover her boyfriend and convince him not to hate her again? I guess we'll find out. The other character in Shadow and Bone who got a big character arc glow up was Zoya you know what? I'm just gonna call her Zoya. She does eventually betray the Darkling in the books, but not as early as she does in the series. Nor does she get quite the same level of time to introduce herself. This kind of thing really exemplifies why book adaptations to TV can be so great. Smaller characters can often get bigger arcs to justify hiring legions of talented actors. I, for one, can't wait to see how Zoya rages out after she searches through the remains of what the Darkling did to her home. At this point, it should be no surprise that the cast got really into filming the show. Not only did they all read the books, but a lot of them did a good deal of their own stunts. Some of them even have the scars to prove it. Apparently, during one of Amida Sumon's various fights as Inej, she looked down to see blood dripping everywhere. She was even more surprised to see that it was her that was bleeding. It turns out it was no big deal, and she's actually proud of the scar it made once it healed. You know what? I bet Inej would be proud too. There was one moment in Shadow and Bone that was really gruesome. I mean, there were a lot of gruesome sequences, but only one that was like, did they really just go there? That would be, of course, the moment where the Darkling has the stag collar literally bonded into Alina's flesh and collarbone. It's a truly harrowing sequence that makes the scene about more than just Kurgan taking control of Alina, but implies something even worse. In the books, this was literally just a collar, so it was quite the shock for everyone. The producers weren't actually trying to make the show's most gruesome image, but actually had logistical concerns about the amplifier's look. I feel like there was probably a compromise in between a cumbersome spiky necklace and literally grafting it onto her bones, but they didn't ask me. The romantic sequences in Shadow and Bone were instantly iconic. I mean, there's no shame if you had to hit that rewind 15 seconds a few times. A lot of the credit for those sequences goes to the writers for the show. Both sequences were in the books, but were played very differently. In the show, Alina was the one who initiated their physical relationship, and even when Kurgan took control, he made sure to check that she was sure. This was very important for the producers to show the importance of consent to a largely young female audience. Ben Barnes absolutely killed it as the Darkling this season. It's no surprise that Barnes fell into the part so effortlessly, seeing as he's an expert in both the YA fantasy genre and Netflix villainy. His big break was playing Prince Caspian in the Chronicles of Narnia series. He's also starred alongside John Bernthal as Billy Russo in The Punisher. That guy really can't make it through a first season without gnarly face scars, can he? Most notably, he appeared alongside Shadow and Bone co-star Archie Renault in Gold Digger, so yeah, there's plenty more Kurgan to go around. The big draw of Shadow and Bone is that big, shadowy expanse that runs for miles known as the Fold. Where exactly did Leigh Bardugo get the idea for a big patch of darkness that stretches across a continent? According to the author, the Shadow Fold was inspired by other fantasy series. In many other stories, darkness is a metaphor, but Bardugo was inspired to make it literal. She wanted to ask what would happen if darkness was a place. Well, we certainly have our answer, and it is a horrifying, monster-ridden nightmarescape. Shadow and Bone features several different countries, religions, and cultures across the Grishaverse. Each of these distinct cultures have their own unique language. If that reminds you of Game of Thrones, it's no big surprise. The Grishaverse has David J. Peterson to thank for the languages. The American language creator worked on the famous HBO series and helped bring about languages like Dothraki to the big screen. If you like his work, listen closely to works like Raya and the Last Dragon, Motherland, Fort Salem, and the new Dune movie. Not only does he have the coolest job ever, but he could probably tell you about it in a dozen languages he made up himself. How cool is that? It's almost exhausting how many fantasy series are based on British history. That's why it was instantly refreshing to start Shadow and Bone and discover that the series was based around Russian history instead. Apparently, Bardugo was fascinated by the extremes of 19th century Russia. While it is commendable that she took inspiration from a different part of human history than most fantasy series, many critics complain that her depiction of the era isn't exactly accurate. My guess is that they had fewer gargoyle-like monsters flying around in a shadowy expanse. I feel like I would have remembered that in history class. The first season of Shadow and Bone had one very special cameo that pretty much everyone missed. That's because it wasn't an actor or even a person at all, it was actually a book. In one scene, you might remember Jesper going on and on about a book in his hands. If you look closely at the book, you might notice that there's something familiar about the cover art. That's because the book is actually called Shadow and Bone. The reason that it slipped past so many people is that it is written using a fictional alphabet. I really hope they keep this up every season so that each and every book can have a cameo. It could be like this franchise's version of Stan Lee. The first episode ends with a literal bang where poor Alexei gets blown away right after escaping the fold. Talk about going from basically winning the lottery to getting struck by lightning in the same week. In the books, this is arguably even worse. Instead of getting a bullet, Alexei is left in the fold where we can assume he becomes a Big Mac for a family of Volcra. The reason for this is that they needed Alexei to act as the trigger for the crows to enter the conflict. So at least those extra 45 seconds of screen time had a purpose. Probably the biggest secret in every episode of the series comes right at the very beginning. Each title sequence features a slight variation on the formula that highlights what the episode is about. For example, the first episode features a giant burst of light that hints at the Sun Summoner's business at the episode's end. In stark contrast, the last episode features darkness creeping over light, signifying the characters entering the fold. Pay close attention to each title sequence and be prepared to be impressed. Kaz has one of the best wardrobes in the entire series, hands down. Not only does he have the perfect criminal sense of style, but it also reveals a lot about his character. Kaz doesn't wear gloves just because it makes him look cool. He does it because he hates the feel of human touch. His cane also has a special meaning. He uses it because author Leigh Bardugo has osteonecrosis, which sometimes requires her to use a cane. This is the inspiration for Kaz's limp in the series. Perhaps the best thing about this is that Freddie Carter ended up stealing his gloves and cane and took them home. Guess he did become a master thief after all. Knew it. If you think that Shadow and Bone has an incredible cast already, just wait. There are actually more fan-favorite characters who are on the way. Nikolai Landstoff is a charming privateer who has a mysterious past that becomes very important later on. Then there's Wyland Van Eck, who becomes a big part of the Crow's storyline, especially where Jesper is concerned. Fans are already speculating wildly about who could play these characters in the future. Some fans hope that they would appear in the first season like other characters who got an upgrade. But they revealed before the series began that we'd have to wait for Season 2. What a tease. So a Season 2 of Shadow and Bone is basically a given at this point, am I right? The series is the kind of massive hit that you know HBO Max would love to have right now. A second season is pretty likely, but there are much wider plans for the series in the air already. The producers have 5 more seasons in mind for the main Shadow and Bone series. Aside from that, there's also a distinct possibility that spin-offs are on the way too.
Have you ever wondered what it would take to pull off a heist in some of the most secure, heavily guarded, high-profile places on the planet? Twice? Well, you shouldn't be doing that. It's illegal. Stop it. But if you're looking to watch an amazing series about that, then allow me to introduce you to La Casa de Papel. Now, for the people out there who aren't familiar with the show, La Casa de Papel, or its English title Money Heist, follows a group of criminals who carry out 2 extremely ambitious heists while coming to consider each other family in the process. With the second volume of Season 5 released, the series has finally brought the stories of the professor, who is the mastermind behind the schemes, his formidable crew, and 2 of the most grandiose heists in television history to a close. Considering that it had so much to wrap up, its final season was absolutely filled to the brim with content. So much so that some of the elements of the series that weren't in the spotlight could have easily gone overlooked. With that being said, here's a list of 25 things about Money Heist you may have missed. Also, spoilers ahead for all of Season 5. If you haven't seen it just yet, save this video for later and come back when you're all caught up. All good? Great. Let's let this heist commence. I think it's fitting that we start this list off with an Easter egg having to do with the show's intro theme. My Life is Going On, performed by Cecilia Kroll and composed by Manel Santisteban, is honestly one of the best tracks to kick off every episode. Its somber melody captures the dread each of the characters feel during the heist, its lyrics provide an accurate snapshot of the relationships we see throughout the show, and it's overall just an amazing song that I'd probably cry to in my car. Anyway, during the bar scene in episode 8 of season 5, yeah, you know the scene. The bar singer and pianist are none other than both Kroll and Santisteban, an awesome way to include the people who created a key element of the show. Plus, their performances work perfectly alongside the scene of Berlin confronting his son Raphael and his ex-wife Tatiana, who were just revealed to be seeing each other. You know, just normal family things. Actually, let's talk a little bit more about that, because the moment was actually foreshadowed in volume 1 of season 5. In episode 4, we get a small break from the action to see Berlin taking Raphael on his very first heist. These flashbacks actually give us a lot of setup for the upcoming plot points in the season, but more on that later. After they complete the heist, Berlin tells his son,
"If you really want something in life, you have to steal it from somebody else."
As the camera pans over from Raphael to Tatiana, a small moment that foreshadowed Raphael taking this advice to heart and stealing his father's lover. All this proved to me was thieves are both good at stealing your money and your girl, so you better watch out. Speaking of thieves stealing lovers, the storyline of Arturo versus Denver over Stockholm's love finally reached its climax this season, and Arturo wasn't pulling any punches. During their military-grade firefight, Arturo lashes out at Denver in an attempt to lure him into the line of fire. On the surface, this may just seem like Arturo's trying any way he can to win the battle, but his outburst surprisingly summarizes how Denver views their rivalry, a fight between a man worth nothing and a man with everything. Spanning all the way back to season 1, we're shown that Denver is taught and believes that he's nothing. This core belief makes him feel he isn't worthy of being with Stockholm, who is in a more stable position in life. But it was exactly in this fight with Arturo that Denver pushed past his insecurities and realized that he is indeed worthy of being Stockholm's lover. But what exactly happened to Arturo afterwards? Now, I know this isn't a question that everyone is begging to have answered. Arturo is probably one of the more unlikable characters of the series, to put it lightly. But after he's transported out of the Bank of Spain and reported to be alive, we never revisit his character. Although it is a small nitpick and in no way takes away from the absolute greatness of this season, I would have loved to see him face the consequences of his actions. But since he is still alive, I fully expect Arturo to continue to be as annoying as ever past the series ending. Knowing Netflix's track record with cancellations, there's no way that Money Heist would have been allowed to get all the way to season 5 if it wasn't wildly successful. In fact, it's now one of Netflix's most viewed series of all time. But it wasn't always like that. Money Heist has a sort of rags to riches story, as it started off airing on a Spanish television station and was quickly considered to be a flop. It was almost cancelled in its first season until Netflix decided to buy it and give it new life on the platform. How much did Netflix buy it for, you ask? I don't think you're prepared for these numbers. Drum roll, please. Netflix bought the series for a whopping $2. Yeah, I wish I was making that up. According to a news report by the UK Express and a head of Left Bank Pictures, the show's rights were seriously sold for only $2. Yeah, the multi-billion-dollar studio definitely had a hard time paying for that one. Even though the show proved to be a hit, all good things have to come to an end someday, right? Not ready to say goodbye to the gang just yet though? Me neither. Luckily for us, Netflix released the behind-the-scenes documentary, Money Heist, From Tokyo to Berlin. There's 2 entire episodes focusing on both Volume 1 and 2 of Season 5. So if you're not ready to let go of the characters, or you just enjoy some behind-the-scenes content, I highly encourage you to check out this incredible docuseries. Throughout most of the series, the professor is presented as this mysterious, untouchable character that is always one step ahead of the authorities. He also has a strict rule for no relationships of any kind. This rule is obviously broken, but the rule can be seen as a reflection of the professor's tendency to never let his walls down. A lesser known reflection of this aspect of his personality is his more slouch-like posture in most of the show. However, it's only in this last season, when he chooses to open up more towards his comrades and confidently take charge, that his posture really improves. A small yet powerful sign of the professor's character development as the series came to a close. Whew, okay, this one's gonna be tough. Tokyo's final moments were seriously some of the most heart-wrenching of season 5. I mean, everything from her sacrifice to Rio desperately trying to save her and all the crew's reactions. Come on, are the writers trying to break us here? Throughout all that, there's one crucial detail that could have been easily overlooked. Tokyo's final narration while she was alive.
And if I can't run with my body, at least let my soul be free.
Was a callback to one of her first lines all the way in episode 1.
And if I can't run with my body, at least let my soul escape.
Quite literally bringing her character story full circle. Fortunately, this isn't the last time we hear from her. Even though Tokyo's story has concluded, her narration continues all the way into the final scenes of the show. Multiple times in the series, it's established that Tokyo and the professor see each other as their guardian angels. Some of Tokyo's last words were even her thanking the professor for watching over her, and to in turn let her watch over him. Tokyo's continued narration after her death could be seen just as that. Her literally becoming the professor's guardian angel as the heist continued. And she must have did a good job because no one else from the gang suffered the same fate afterwards. As mentioned previously, the remarkable success of Money Heist is the reason it survived being outright cancelled from its original network. But did you know it was such a hit that it caused a shortage of Spain's film equipment? According to an article written for El Español, the explosion of many Spanish Netflix series, the biggest being Money Heist, was causing other film production studios to struggle finding resources. They even mentioned that it takes more than 25 calls just to find a cinematographer. With the series reaching this conclusion, I'm sure things will get easier from here on out. Just kidding. Netflix isn't quite done with the Money Heist universe just yet, because a Berlin prequel series is planned to be coming out in 2023. Those Berlin and Raphael flashbacks could very well serve to be a springboard into what we'll see in the upcoming series. And if it's as popular as its predecessor, then Spain might not be out of the woods just yet regarding that production shortage. Not only did those flashbacks set up the prequel, but they also set up one of the biggest twists of the entire series. A twist that was resolved by a single note the professor wrote to Raphael. But what exactly did the professor write to persuade his nephew? As the show concluded, the exact contents of the note were never revealed. The only clue that were given was Raphael reassuring Tatiana that it was the right decision because it's a matter of family. From there, we can only assume that the note somehow reminded Raphael of Berlin and he wished to honor his father's memory. The trust that formed between the professor and Alicia Sierra was one of the more surprising ones in season 5, with Sierra previously being one of the main antagonists. Of course, it wasn't a smooth transition, but it was signified by the use of none other than the professor's glasses. Initially, Alicia Sierra drops her own glasses while trying to escape, the first sign of her also slowly dropping her guard. She then wears his glasses as she tries to make a deal with Samayo, foreshadowing her eventual trust in the professor. Finally, she returns the glasses to the professor, allowing him to take charge and leaving her no other option than to literally trust his vision. Of course, we wanted to see Nairobi reunite with her son, but unfortunately, the writers had other plans. But why take her out right before the final season? According to an article published by the Indian Express, the director believed that Nairobi would have a hard time fitting into season 5. He goes on to say that season 5 is the season of direct confrontation, and Nairobi as a character was not made for direct confrontation. Additionally, Nairobi's death served as a way to further inspire the crew to succeed in their mission. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't mind this amazing show continuing, but the show's creator, Alex Pina, felt that season 5 was the perfect place to end it. In an interview with Pina, he states that it's always better to leave sooner than later, as they made over 2,000 minutes of fiction and felt that they've exhausted the characters' emotional arcs. It's great that they knew when to stop, because if they continued, they could have risked tainting the Money Heist legacy. Hopefully other shows look to it as an example of how to end a series. Yeah, I'm looking at you, SpongeBob SquarePants. Although the creators knew when to bring the original run of the show to a close, we're far from done getting Money Heist content. Along with the Berlin prequel, there's also a Korean adaptation in the works. While we don't know when this version of the series will be released, we recently received an update that revealed the entire main cast for the first season. So get ready for a new way to experience the story and characters you love, because it looks like Money Heist fans are going to continue to get fed well into the foreseeable future. The Money Heist docuseries is filled with tons of fun facts about the creation of the show. One of which that's mentioned is how Alvaro Moritz, who plays the professor, prepares himself to get into character. According to the series, in order for Moritz to give the best performance of the professor possible, he listened to the jazz track A Night in Tunisia in order to get into the groove of the character. Who knew the professor was into jazz? Mort is also very particular about how he wears his clothes, needing them to be put on in a very specific order to really feel like he's one with the character. Fernando Cayo, the actor who played the military madman Tamayo, also had a lot of preparation to do in order to pull off such an intense role. According to the docuseries, Cayo practiced his character scenes while on the treadmill in order to better retain his lines. He also used images and music that evoked the intense emotions Tamayo expressed throughout the final season, and we know just how heated Tamayo got during those scenes.
De Sarajevo, en la Guerra Mundial Berlín ardió cojones y nadie dijo, ese barrio no lo bombardeéis, que es muy bonito.
So the main event the Berlin flashbacks were leading up to was the big twist. But what if I told you they also served to further flesh out the professor's character? Hear me out. The final episode of the show placed a huge emphasis on the importance of thievery running in the family, dating all the way back to Berlin and the professor's father. It's also the episode where the professor truly accepts that he steals solely for the sake of being a thief. One of the reasons that the professor's acceptance of his own nature doesn't feel like it's being pulled out of nowhere is because it's established all throughout the season that Berlin and Raphael also possess this trait. Thievery really does run in the family. When comparing the last days on set for Alvaro Mort and Pedro Alonso, who played Berlin, the two had vastly different experiences. According to an interview conducted by Pink Villa, Mort refers to his last day on set as a beautiful and emotional day, and recalls being with the same crew he was with on day one. Alonso, however, recalls none of his colleagues being with him, and describes his final day on set as disturbing. He reportedly felt that being separated from the main cast in real life paralleled Berlin's passing in the show. Poor Alonso. Hopefully he'll get to reunite with some of the cast in the Berlin prequel. Another overlooked reason for Money Heist success is how good it looks for a TV show, and there are multiple reasons for that. For one, the series mostly chose to use practical effects over CGI when filming its scenes. The docuseries reveals that they took every opportunity that they could to use practical effects, allowing the cast to more accurately respond to the situations around them. Additionally, the show also made use of filming on location, meaning that the cast and crew traveled to specific places as opposed to using a set. One example of this was the oil rig scene in season 5 episode 6, which was filmed at an actual oil rig near the Canary Islands. Because of the production crew's decision to do a lot of on-location filming, there are many recognizable places from the show that are available for you to visit. The city of Madrid even promotes some of those spots on their tourism website. Their website goes into detail about the locations the show used all the way up to season 4, and hopefully will be updated with season 5 soon. So if you're planning a trip to Madrid, and you're a fan of Money Heist, make sure to check out some of the show's iconic spots. The professor's key rule of no relationships was broken in more ways than one. In fact, even though the entire operation was planned with the goal of stealing, most of the characters were also driven by love. Tokyo wanted to save Rio so they could continue to be together, Palermo wanted the heist to succeed for Berlin's sake, the professor saved Lisbon, Manila only wanted to join to spend time with Denver, the entire crew was motivated by their love for Nairobi, and even Arturo came back hoping to win over Stockholm. Season 5 really exposed just how much love motivated our characters, even more so than the money. You know, they should really change the show's name from Money Heist to Heist of Love. Anyone? Just me? Alright, yep, I'll keep that one in the drafts. The red jumpsuits worn by the crew and the hostages are one of the show's signature looks, and like the dolly mask, they've become synonymous with the show itself. In an interview with the Indian Express, the show's costume designer Carlos Diaz described the project of dressing all the characters in these suits as a huge challenge, and that there were over 600 suits made throughout the show's run. And these suit changes are practically invisible for the audience. That just goes to show how good Diaz and the rest of the crew are at their jobs. Out of all the themes this show pushed, finding a balance between maturity and embracing your inner child was one of, if not the most emphasized in the final season. The show stresses that the idea of becoming too mature means losing your passions and love for life. Berlin even says this outright during a flashback.
No one can take away my enthusiasm, not you, nobody, because only when you're willfully immature, can you achieve great things.
Most of the characters' final bout of development is them realizing this and finding a middle ground between maturity and their inner child. One of the show's final messages is not to sacrifice your passions in order to remain secure. Like Tokyo said all the way back in episode 1,
and if I can't run with my body, at least let my soul escape.
What were some of your favorite moments from the final season of Money Heist? Were you satisfied with this ending? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go embrace my inner child and take a nap.